Well, good morning. Tim was the winner of The Apprentice, and I think there's one thing we probably all agree in this room is we need more apprentices. It's also a double pleasure to welcome Tim because he's not the Labour supporting Alan Sugar. So we've got a few minutes to learn from the experience that Tim has really shown to the world through television and is now doing in practice. And Tim's running something now called the Bright Ideas Trust, and perhaps you can kick off by telling us a little bit about what you're doing in that.
Thanks for that, Alan. Well, the Bright Ideas Trust is a registered charity which is incorporated as a company to really support the next generation of entrepreneurs. What we're looking for is young people who are 16 to 30 who have bright ideas, who then need the financial support, the mentoring and guidance, and the expertise from some of our corporate partners to actually really understand how to navigate the bureaucracy, the taxation, and the really difficult bits about wanting to start a business. And we wanted to take the enthusiasm of people who have seen shows like Dragon's Den and The Apprentice and really harness that into the real world and make that transition from creative into business a realistic possibility for lots of young people.
See, what's fantastic about this, I think, is that you're concentrating on the young. And if you're looking at the 16 to 30 group, perhaps you can just say a little bit about how you think this ought to be handled in schools, for instance. If you're getting a 16-year-old, they might just still be at school, or at least they'd have learnt something in school. I mean, give us a clue as to where things are going right and wrong in Britain.
Well, it was a good point what Doug mentioned earlier in terms of getting in as early as possible into schools. Unfortunately, there's 1.3 million children who are classed as not in employment, education and training. And what we really understand from talking to those groups directly is that they're extremely passionate about certain things, about the arts, about music, about something, and they want to understand how they turn those into businesses. But there's not a lot of support that they get to actually make that transition. And although there's some enterprise training in school, we don't think there's enough. And we don't think that teachers are really telling children about profit is actually a good thing. Profit is a positive. It's not a dirty word and something that should be hidden. And sometimes not everybody is going to win. And what we want to be able to do is get the brightest and the best, regardless of where you come from, or your background, or your educational attainment. If you're really passionate about business, we want to teach you how to do that.
But you've just hit on something that I think is fascinating. The key phrase you just used there is, whatever your background. Now, I've got views about business, and I know you have. Perhaps you could say something about, you know, the attitudes and the origins of some of the people you're working with, and what it does for them. What is it that business can do that so many other walks of life can't?
Well, we're very fortunate, I think. I'm extremely privileged to work with some really passionate young people who may not have had the best start in life, shall we say. We're working with people from youth offending teams who have been incarcerated, and sometimes who have just made a wrong choice along the way and not had taken all the opportunities when they were actually at school. But we don't want to label these people or pontificate about what should happen, about throw them into institutions or teach them how to make a CV. Although national service might be a good thing for some of them, and it's not a bad thing, shall we say. But what we're saying now is that for those people who are enthusiastic enough, who have a passion, who have a drive, but may not be the most academically gifted or may have made a wrong choice, we shouldn't say there's nothing for you now. And the beauty about business doesn't care about if you're black, you're white, you're male, you're female, what your religion is. It matters about if the numbers work. And that objective measure of success is something we can teach this generation, and they can focus their energy to really get them off of the streets, to get them away from some of the nonsense that they're surrounded by, and really focus their energy on something that's positive. And the beauty of all of that is that those successful businesses that we support will then contribute back into society. Yeah. That's the thing. We have to understand that entrepreneurial activity in the UK is something we should be looking for and actually promoting, because we want them to be successful to contribute back into the economy.
So what you're really saying is there's a fantastic message about social mobility in the enterprise message for young people, and that it can give people from any background a chance. And I guess then they are examples to other people who follow. And so once it spreads, it can really make a social difference. I mean, are there any examples, for instance, with the people you've been working with of this kind of opportunity to lift people up?
Hugely. We've got a young gentleman who is very interested in film and photography. He left school with one GCSE, which he got an A star in, but he was French, so it was easy for him to get that.
He got it in French.
He got it in French. So,
that helps.
Mind
you, a lot of people who are English don't always get them in English, so...
The power of languages, he's taken that forward. Unfortunately, he'd taken a couple of wrong turns and he wasn't too sure about where he wanted to go to. He was working with a local-based community group who got him in touch with the BBC and MTV and helped him make a couple of films. But they only paid him £250 a time. What we said is that he can work with some of our corporate partners to do some corporate films. We've set him up with a revenue model, he's got a business plan, and he's now out there actually pitching for ideas. That's really where we want to focus this young person. Without our intervention, he really wouldn't know how to actually get into that network. What we're saying, it's very important to have the passion and drive, but sometimes you need somebody who's going to help you to get in contact with people who can take you a bit further.
This is the sort of business support message we've just been hearing from Doug.
Exactly.
And tell me, in your experience, how that should work and where it's good and where it's bad at the moment.
My big problem with business support at the moment is that it focuses very much on a grant mentality, where it's you get something for nothing. Our whole model is based on the fact that we give equity investment into our companies, and we take an equity stake out of those organisations. We want our money back. We make it very clear we want our money back, because in the real world, you can't just go up to a bank. Well, banks may not be a good example at the moment.
We're looking at the long term.
Let's stick with Doug. You may not be able to go to an Asia investor and ask them to give you some money for nothing. The reality is that when we support these young people, we teach them how the real world works, because I believe if you get something for nothing, you don't work as hard sometimes. But if you know that you're incentivized, if there's an incentive for you to give me something back, because otherwise I'm going to be that monkey on your back waiting and giving you grief and asking where your reports are, etc., then you're going to work a bit harder to make sure you can own 100% of your company. And we facilitate that transfer.
So they can buy it back by earning it out.
Correct. They can they can buy back 100% control of their stake, because we haven't got the same risk-reward profile as maybe a venture capitalist or a business angel may be looking. But we want to teach these people how the real world works. You can't have this soft cotton wool environment which says that you're going to be a success if I give you this free money, because when you go out and bid for contracts, you're going to be against real hard-nosed competitors who don't care about where you're from. It's about everybody has to achieve. So we want to teach them how it really works.
But what about the money? Because one of the real problems people talk about, if they're particularly from a deprived background, setting up a business, is I can't get any finance. You know, I've got no assets to pledge against a loan, so the bank won't lend me anything. I don't find it easy to build a business plan. What sort of patterns are emerging in the work you're doing which actually give people the seed capital and then the knowledge to use it properly so they can start and then build their business?
Let's make it very clear that we're working with some individuals who sometimes can't get a bank account, who have got poor credit ratings, and therefore it is sometimes very difficult to go the normal route. However, I don't like excuses. I like the entrepreneurial mindset. And let's get this very clear. An entrepreneur is not a job title. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. It's the way that you look at certain situations. And for those young people who are very entrepreneurial because the circumstances dictate they have to be sometimes, what they find is that they've come up with very good ideas. Now, this whole thing around difficult economic climate, etc., I know for a fact there's enough money for good ideas. If you've got a good ideas, you'll find an investor who'll want to profit from that business enterprise that you're thinking of taking forward. Where we come in is that we provide microfinance to get the businesses on their way. So in excess of £5,000, up to £25,000 to start an organisation, which is enough to prove concept and start getting some revenue back. My whole aim is that I want to introduce these companies to next stage investors, to business angels, to venture capital, so they can go to provide a deal flow. So if you've got a good business idea, you can find the money.
You're making the entrepreneur sound like the politician. It's a mindset. It's not really a job. What about some of those other things, really for the startup businesses, which I am told are much more difficult than for the big business with a human resources department? What about actually taking on that first employee? Is it intimidating? Is it a minefield? What would you say about someone, you know, the best thing surely anyone can do in their life is give someone else a livelihood. But is it easy to do? It's
not at all. When you're dealing with small enterprises particularly, to take on another employee can be a huge drain on your resources. And particularly when you're dealing with the amount of forms and everything else you've got to fill in, national insurance, everything. It's quite a deterrent sometimes for taking on individuals. Particularly if you want to go into apprentices and other stuff, there's not those incentives for individuals.
There's a lot of regulation that goes with it all.
A huge amount. What we'd like to see is, we'd really like to see tax incentives and breaks for individuals who want to start entrepreneurial endeavours. Because I think you want more entrepreneurs to come back into the cycle, not be turned off from reinvesting their money.
That's good. Well, I mean, I think we've learned a lot from... I must say this morning, I'm not sure if I'm Michael Parkinson or Cecil Parkinson, really. I've done the interview bit, but Tim, you've been great. Thank you very much for coming to our conference. I know you're going to stay on the panel discussions we're going to have in a minute, but I think we're all very grateful for your insights. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. See you again.